5 million years ago, something walked through the ancient forests of Europe that shouldn't have existed. It wasn't human. It wasn't ape. And what it represents has been quietly gathering dust in museum drawers for over a century. A potential rewrite of everything we thought we knew about who got here first, who walked upright, and what evolution was capable of attempting before we ever entered the stage. The fragments of bone, scattered across continents and time, tell a story so controversial that many paleontologists have simply chosen to look away. The story of a creature that challenges our most basic assumptions about what makes us unique. When paleontologists uncovered the first fragments in southern France in 1903, they thought they were simply looking at another ancient monkey. They classified it as Paradolichopithecus, placing it among the ancestors of modern baboons and macaques. Nothing remarkable, just another player in the evolutionary game. But as more fossils emerged across an astonishing range from the Mediterranean shores of France and Greece, across the sun-baked plains of Central Asia, possibly reaching as far as China, scientists began noticing something disturbing about this creature, something that didn't fit the established timeline, something that threatens to overturn what we thought was uniquely human. The sheer geographical spread of these findings is itself astonishing, suggesting a highly successful species that dominated vast territories across the ancient world at a time when the continents were still settling into their modern configurations, when mountain ranges were still rising, and when the climate oscillated between periods of warmth and encroaching ice. The first warning sign came from its size. At nearly 66 pounds, Paradolichopithecus was a heavyweight among monkeys, muscular, broad-shouldered, with powerful jaws and slicing canines that could tear through flesh with terrifying efficiency. Dental analysis reveals teeth designed not just for processing plant material, but for delivering devastating bites, canines that could puncture hide and rip muscle with precision. This wasn't a gentle fruit eater, but an opportunistic omnivore, capable of hunting when necessary. But impressive. Dimensions were just the beginning. When researchers examined a small ankle bone, the talus, everything changed. This single fragment of fossilized bone showed something impossible. It wasn't shaped like a monkey's ankle. It wasn't even like an ape's. The talus of Paradolichopithecus bore an uncanny, disturbing resemblance to our own. The ankle bones showed specific adaptations for stability during the full range of motion needed for upright walking. The same motion your own ankle makes with each step you take. Specifically, it demonstrated modifications for both dorsiflexion and plantarflexion, the up and down movements crucial for the human gait cycle. The outer leg bone, the fibula, revealed signs of increased weight bearing, exactly what happens when an animal regularly stands on two legs. This wasn't just a monkey that occasionally stood up. This was a creature whose body had been reshaped by millions of years of walking upright across ancient European landscapes, at least 3 million years before the first human ancestors reached Europe. But that was just the beginning of the mystery. What makes this discovery truly unsettling is what it implies about parallel evolution. Paradolichopithecus wasn't related to humans at all. It belonged to an entirely different branch of the primate family tree. Yet somehow, in isolation, this lineage of monkeys began following a similar evolutionary trajectory as our own ancestors in Africa, standing upright, freeing the hands, walking across open terrain, watching for predators from an elevated position. We've been told for decades that bipedalism was the hallmark, adaptation that set our lineage apart, the first step on the path to humanity. But here was a monkey, completely unrelated to us, independently discovering the same solution millions of years ago on a different continent. This discovery shatters the narrative of human uniqueness that underlies so much of our understanding of evolution, and the similarities don't end with the ankle. The pelvis, though fragmentary, shows signs of restructuring to support upright posture. The vertebral fragments hint at a spinal column adapting to vertical loading rather than horizontal suspension with each new bone fragment. the picture becomes clearer. This wasn't a casual experiment, but a committed evolutionary direction. And that wasn't even the strangest part. The upper arm bone of Paradolichopithecus revealed a deep groove where the biceps muscle attached and an unusually large, rounded joint surface at the elbow features, indicating powerful arms with a high degree of mobility. The forearm bones show distinct attachments for muscles controlling precise movements of the wrist and fingers. Adaptations not typically seen in quadrupedal monkeys focused on locomotion, combined with its bipedal capabilities. Researchers believe these adaptations allowed it to carry and manipulate objects while walking upright. The hands themselves remain frustratingly elusive in the fossil record, but the arm bones tell us enough. These were limbs designed for something beyond climbing and knuckle walking. Modern macaques in Thailand use stone tools to crack open shellfish and nuts, with different groups developing distinct tool-using traditions passed down through generations. On the islands of Japan, some macaque troops have been observed washing sweet potatoes in the ocean before eating them, a learned behavior that spread through their social groups over time. Baboons have been observed throwing rocks and sticks at predators, displaying a rudimentary understanding of projectile weapons. But these modern monkeys perform these behaviors with bodies primarily adapted for quadrupedal movement. Imagine what Paradolichopithecus might have accomplished with arms specifically evolved for manipulation while standing upright. According to some controversial theories, this ancient European monkey may have been fashioning simple weapons and tools millions of years before our ancestors, leaving little to no archaeological evidence behind. What decomposes? Unmodified stones blend back into the landscape. A sharpened stick can kill, but will rot away within years. Even today, with all our technology, we struggle to detect the tool use of modern non-human primates unless we directly observe the behavior. How much more difficult to detect such behaviors in creatures that vanished millions of years ago. We may have been looking for the wrong signatures of intelligence in the wrong places all along. This detail would send shockwaves through the scientific world if it were more widely acknowledged. The environmental context that shaped Paradolichopithecus adds another layer to this evolutionary puzzle. The Pliocene epoch 5.3 to 2.6 million years ago was a time of dramatic change across Eurasia. The Mediterranean had recently refilled after the Messinian salinity crisis, when it had dried almost completely. Mountain ranges like the Alps and Himalayas were still actively rising. Grasslands were expanding as forests retreated. This shifting mosaic of habitats created precisely the conditions that would favor adaptations for traveling efficiently across open ground while maintaining the ability to exploit forested areas. Paleoclimatic data suggests that Paradolichopithecus inhabited regions characterized by seasonal changes, not the stable year-round resources of a tropical forest, but environments that required migration, planning, and adaptation. Pollen records from sediments contemporary with Paradolichopithecus fossils indicate a patchwork landscape of woodlands and open country, an environment strikingly similar to the African savannas, where our own ancestors evolved bipedalism. These parallel pressures appear to have pushed both lineages towards similar solutions, despite their different starting points. While traditional interpretations suggest that Paradolichopithecus was simply adapting to a ground-dwelling lifestyle, without any implications for intelligence, the combined evidence of their anatomy and environment points to something more complex. A creature navigating an ecological niche that would later prove crucial for human evolution. Perhaps most disturbing is the timeline overlap with our own ancestors. Homo erectus began expanding into Eurasia well over 2 million years ago, entering territories where troops of Paradolichopithecus had already been established for millions of years. This wasn't a brief encounter. These species potentially shared landscapes for nearly 1 million years. The implications are staggering. Did early humans hunt these bipedal monkeys? Did Paradolichopithecus, with their powerful canines and potential tool use, pose a threat to human camps? Or is there evidence, as some fringe researchers suggest, of cooperation? Primitive alliances against common predators? The fossil record remains frustratingly silent on these questions, but the overlap in time and space makes interaction virtually certain. Consider the dynamics of such encounters. Homo erectus, standing around 5 to 6 feet tall, coming face to face with troops of dog-faced, bipedal monkeys weighing 66 pounds, armed with slicing canines, and possibly wielding crude weapons. These would not have been trivial interactions, but potentially life or death. Confrontations that shaped the survival strategies of both species. Some alternative researchers have pointed to unexplained fracture patterns on certain Homo erectus fossils, damage consistent with powerful bites rather than predatory. Big cats, though mainstream paleoanthropologists attribute these to other causes. Yet this potentially pivotal chapter in human prehistory receives almost no attention in textbooks. It's as if the story of a bipedal, two-losing monkey that preceded humans in Europe doesn't fit neatly into the narrative we've constructed about our unique evolutionary journey. The social structures of Paradolichopithecus remain largely speculative, but comparative analysis with modern Papillonans, baboons, macaques, and their relatives suggests a complex group organization. Modern baboons live in hierarchical troops with sophisticated social politics, long-term alliances, and multi-level communication systems. They demonstrate remarkable problem-solving abilities when confronted with novel challenges. Their social intelligence allows them to navigate complex relationships and remember interactions over long periods. If Paradolichopithecus possessed even comparable cognitive abilities, combined with their bipedal locomotion and manipulative capabilities, we're looking at a creature with significant potential for behavioral complexity. Fossil distributions suggest they lived in substantial groups, not as solitary wanderers, but as socially connected populations. This social dimension adds another layer to their evolutionary potential, the capacity to share information, coordinate activities, and potentially transmit learned behaviors across generations, while direct evidence of social learning remains elusive. The anatomical foundations for such capabilities were clearly present. The world Paradolichopithecus inhabited was unimaginably hostile, a landscape dominated by megafauna that would make modern predators look tame by comparison. Giant hyenas with bone-crushing jaws roamed in packs, capable of taking down prey many times their size. Saber-toothed cats stalked through tall grass. Their elongated canines evolved specifically for delivering fatal wounds to large mammals. Massive mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses that could trample anything in their path wandered across vast territories. Early relatives of wolves and bears hunted through the same forests and plains. This wasn't an environment that tolerated weakness or evolutionary decadence. Each adaptation had to earn its keep against relentless selection pressure. Yet this bipedal monkey not only survived but thrived across vast territories for 4 million years, nearly twice as long as our entire human lineage has existed. Their fossils have been found alongside those of apex predators, suggesting they weren't simply hiding from danger, but actively competing in this savage arena, while conventional explanations suggest their large size and linear lifestyle evolved in response to predation pressure. Alternative researchers point to something more provocative. What if their upright posture, powerful arms, and potential tool use represented the beginnings of a different kind of intelligence? What if, given a few more million years without human competition, Paradolichopithecus might have continued along its parallel path toward something we would recognize as civilization? While mainstream science would consider this pure speculation, the anatomical evidence of their adaptations is undeniable. Their bodies were changing in ways that mirror the crucial first steps of our own evolutionary journey. In rare instances, where Paradolichopithecus remains have been found in cave contexts, they occur alongside those of various prey animals, suggesting either that they used these spaces as shelters or that they were bringing food to central locations. Some controversial interpretations of these assemblages suggest deliberate accumulation rather than random collection, a behavioral pattern that would indicate a level of planning and spatial organization rarely attributed to non-human primates. The bone fragments themselves occasionally bear marks that some fringe researchers interpret as evidence of processing with tools, though conventional explanations attribute these to natural taphonomic processes or the teeth of scavengers. Without systematic excavations specifically focused on investigating these possibilities, the evidence remains tantalizing but inconclusive. This highlights a crucial problem in paleopromatology. We find what we look for. If researchers aren't specifically searching for evidence of cognitive complexity in non-hominin primates, such evidence might go unrecognized even when preserved. What's particularly striking about the Paradolichopithecus mystery is how little we actually know, despite its evolutionary significance. After 4 million years of dominance across Eurasia, we have only fragmentary remains, a jawbone here, an ankle there, scattered pieces of a puzzle with most parts missing. The relatively small number of specimens can be partly attributed to the realities of the fossil record. Preservation is always the exception rather than the rule. But this alone doesn't explain the limited research attention. Some researchers have suggested this relative obscurity is not accidental, that findings challenging the linear narrative of human uniqueness receive less funding, less attention, and fewer excavations focused specifically on understanding them. Discoveries that align with established paradigms tend to generate excitement, publication in prestigious journals, and further investment. Those that complicate the story often receive more skeptical treatment, while mainstream paleontologists would dispute this characterization. It's undeniable that Paradolichopithecus receives far less attention than hominid fossils of similar or even lesser significance. The fossil record itself presents an incomplete picture, not because evidence doesn't exist, but because we haven't been looking for it with the same intensity we devote to our own ancestors. And here's where the story takes its most unsettling turn. According to controversial theories proposed by some researchers, Paradolichopithecus may not have disappeared entirely when the conventional timeline suggests. Isolated populations could have persisted in ecological refuges across Eurasia, continuing their parallel experiment in upright walking and manipulation. The conventional extinction date around 1 million years ago coincides with major climatic shifts and the expansion of Homo erectus populations, factors that certainly would have placed pressure on Paradolichopithecus. But extinction is notoriously difficult to prove definitively, especially for a species with a vast geographical range. While mainstream science firmly places their extinction around 1 million years ago, some point to unusual primate fossils from later periods that don't quite fit established classifications, anomalies that are often set aside as aberrant specimens rather than potential evidence of survival. Certain fossil fragments from later Pleistocene contexts show anatomical features reminiscent of Paradolichopithecus, but are typically attributed to other species or dismissed as misidentified. These claims remain highly speculative and rejected by conventional paleontology, but they raise unsettling questions. Have we been too quick to close the book on this evolutionary story? Could isolated populations have continued their unique evolutionary journey in remote regions of Eurasia, perhaps even developing more advanced capabilities? The fossil record, with its gaps and fragmentation, leaves room for questions that may never be fully answered. The implications for our understanding of human evolution extend beyond mere academic curiosity. If bipedalism, one of the hallmark traits of humanity, evolved independently in multiple primate lineages in response to similar environmental pressures, what does this tell us about the inevitability of our own path? The conventional narrative depicts human evolution as a unique journey, an exceptional path that led, almost teleologically, toward intelligence, technology, and civilization. Paradolichopithecus challenges this comforting story. It suggests that evolution doesn't work toward predetermined goals, but explores similar solutions whenever the environmental conditions favor them. Bipedalism isn't a human invention, but a strategy that emerges when the ecological context makes it advantageous. The same may be true for other traits we consider uniquely human: tool use, complex social organization, even rudimentary culture. If multiple lineages were simultaneously exploring these adaptations, seems less miraculous and more probabilistic. One successful experiment among many concurrent trials. But even if we accept the conventional extinction timeline, Paradolichopithecus forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about evolution. The story we tell ourselves that upright walking, tool use, and increased intelligence represent a singular, inevitable path that led to humanity crumbles when faced with this ancient European monkey. Nature doesn't follow scripts or destiny. It experiments endlessly, trying similar solutions in different lineages. When environmental pressures align, Paradolichopithecus wasn't a failed attempt at becoming human. It was a successful experiment that followed its own path for 4 million years before disappearing, perhaps outcompeted by the newcomers from Africa, who happened to arrive with fire, more advanced tools, and larger brains. What this suggests about our own evolutionary journey is profound. There was nothing inevitable about humanity. We weren't destined to emerge. We were simply one experiment among many, the one that happened to survive while others faded into obscurity. Our history books present human evolution as a triumphal march toward consciousness and civilization. But the fossil record reveals a messier truth, a branching tree of experiments, most pruned by time and circumstance, with our lineage merely the last one standing. This realization opens a window into a disturbing question that paleontologists rarely address directly. How many other parallel experiments has Earth witnessed? How many times has evolution pushed a lineage toward intelligence, tool use, or even civilization, only to have it vanish without recognition? Beyond primates, we see hints of convergent evolution toward intelligence in entirely different branches of the tree of life. Corvids, ravens, and crows demonstrate remarkable problem-solving abilities and tool use. Cetaceans, whales, and dolphins possess social complexity and communication systems of extraordinary sophistication. Cephalopods, octopuses, and their relatives display learning and manipulation capabilities, despite following an evolutionary path divergent from vertebrates for over 500 million years. These modern examples suggest that cognition is not a single-track destination, but a summit that can be approached from multiple directions. Paradolichopithecus walked upright across Europe for millions of years, potentially using simple tools, before vanishing so completely that we've recovered only fragments of their existence. They left no art, no structures, no undeniable technological signature, yet their anatomy tells us they were on a path that paralleled our own in crucial ways. So what else might be hidden in the fossil record that we haven't recognized? What other intelligent paths has evolution explored and abandoned? And perhaps most unsettling of all, what if Paradolichopithecus represents not the exception, but the rule? What if intelligence has emerged repeatedly throughout Earth's history, only to disappear without leaving the kinds of evidence we're trained to recognize? These bipedal monkeys walked Europe for 4 million years and nearly vanished from scientific recognition despite having anatomy preserved in the fossil record. Imagine what might have existed and disappeared without leaving even that much behind. So when you picture human prehistory, our ancestors emerging from Africa, tools in hand, mastering fire, and gradually spreading across the globe, remember this: they weren't entering empty landscapes, waiting for intelligent life to arrive. They were walking into territories where evolution had already been experimenting with upright walking, with freed hands, with the fundamentals that would later define humanity. Paradolichopithecus had already tested those waters, already explored that evolutionary space, already demonstrated that our path was not unique, but one of many possible roads. And somewhere in those ancient European forests, A troop of dog-faced, bipedal monkeys might have watched the newcomers with curious eyes, not recognizing that they were witnessing the arrival of the species that would replace them, and eventually forget they ever existed. Perhaps they observed the strange hairless primates with their control of fire, and wondered what strange mutation had produced such creatures. Perhaps they even attempted to mimic some behaviors, to learn from these new competitors, before ultimately succumbing to a changing world. Evolution doesn't preserve the experiments, it abandons. It simply moves on, leaving us to piece together the fragments of paths not taken, glimpses of what might have been if history had unfolded differently. The next time you walk upright across an open space, remember that this seemingly human trait was discovered independently by other branches of the primate family tree, branches that withered while ours flourished. And with each new discovery, we're forced to question not just what we know about our past, but what other evolutionary stories might still lie buried beneath our feet, waiting to be uncovered.